Hey everybody, this is Tom with Rocket Restorations, and today we thought we'd try something a little new. We're gonna do a auction report from the Mecum auctions at Kissimmee, 2024 Mecum. We unfortunately could not make it down there, but we had several friends down there, so we kind of have some insider knowledge on some of these cars. And what we're gonna do is I'll kind of give you some general, overall what we think prices are, and then we'll go through like a couple of the major cars individually, kind of one by one. Um, I understand like not everybody's watching this is in these circles. It's like these cars are really expensive. You think like, oh, they're just for rich people. Well, it's like, even if you don't have a 70 Hemi Charger, you know, no matter what you think, Mecum and Barrett Jackson set prices for the year. Like when stuff sells at these big auctions, like prices follow. It's like a couple years ago when Chargers went crazy. Barrett Jackson was where they started to go crazy. It's like now they've gone up 50, 100% in the last 5 years because they started at auctions. And you can it's a good way to see trends and see where the market is. It's like no matter what you think about the economy or what's going on, like, obviously, the pandemic fueled prices, and, stuff's gone up really, really quickly. 2020, 21, 22, I mean, things are pretty insane. Things have kind of taken a little bit of a step back, but it's definitely interesting to see where the market's gone. And the first one we're going to do is, in particular, is the internet kind of freaked out over, but we'll get to that in a minute. Some of the trends we saw, wing cars, they've been going up, up, up. Just seen some insane prices for Superbirds and Daytonas, and they seem like they're a little bit down this year. There was a Daytona that sold for 220. I said we'll do a individual clip on that, but it sold for less than we thought we probably should have. But there's reasons for that. Like usually when you see auction results, it's like if you can't see the cars in person, like, and they go for like way less than what you think they're supposed to go for, there's usually a reason. It's not just somebody not in the room. They're not numbers matching or bad body work, or on the lights of the stage when they go over. It's really hard to see how bad the cars are. Like, there's kind of a saying that, good cars generally don't go through auctions. Generally, they're private sales. I mean, there are definitely exceptions to that, but it's also a good way, like, it's a good way for dealers to get rid of cars, especially at like Barrett Jackson where there's no reserve. Mecum, they have reserves, so you can put a car through there and keep it. But at Barrett, like if you send it there, it's going. So there's a lot of dealers that dump cars at the auctions. It's a good way to clear out some inventory, and there's pluses and minuses to that. They may get burned a little bit on it, but they're especially the non primetime cars. Like there's generally, I mean, there's definitely good cars in there, but there's also a lot of bad cars through there, and that's why you always want to be careful. Like if you're trying to buy a car at auction, you want to have an expert like me look at it, or be there in person to see it in person. So some other trends we saw, I think the biggest one to me was just the crazy prices on A bodies. They were just way up this year. As I said, we're gonna do the biggest crazy one. We're gonna do a feature on. There was a Duster Twister that got really good money. Those have always been one of my favorite A bodies. They were kind of a 340 package without a 340, and they had the shark tooth grill and stripes, and a lot of the cool options that the 340 car had. But one went for pretty good money. Then there was the Duster, but I said we'll go in a little more depth on that. One thing I've definitely noticed is there's a couple collectors in the hobby, and they seem to get huge premiums when they've had a car, just because the market knows about their knowledge, and they don't buy bad cars. Steve Giuliano was one of those. We keep on seeing cars that Steve owned, and they continue to get a huge premium. He was a very discerning collector. He didn't really buy junk, and the stuff he had, he would put a lot of time and money into. He had a huge stash of NOS parts. He had some of the top guys in the country working for him, and if it touched, if it went through Steve's collection, it was a good car. And then Tim Wilborn too. He owns the big car museum down in Alabama. I said, well, there's a couple cars, a couple of his ex cars that went through. There's one that's a good example of he sold it really high and it sold for less this year. And then he had several cars go through the auction, and most of them went stupid high. There was one that I was a little surprised it didn't get more, honestly. So And that kind of goes towards the wing cars. But they said we'll go through those one by one. When they go up there. Survivors seem to do really well this year. Again, Wellborn had brought a couple that got crazy money. Survivors, they're only original once, and I mean, me personally, I love Survivors. They're great reference cars. When we go to the Muscle Car Corvette Nationals at McCacken, the first place I always go to is the Survivor area where they're doing the OE judging, because it's a restoration shop we really appreciate a good Survivor, and I always like to document them. And I just love original cars. There are only so many out there with original paint and original condition, and it's really nice seeing the originality of the cars. As far as B bodies go, they they were kind of about the same. Roadrunners, there wasn't really any like huge up and down. Super Bs, Chargers seemed about the same. I mean, they're still going for crazy money, but they didn't really seem like that they were, going up huge this year. They kind of seemed like they were kind of staying about the same. So, there were a couple Chargers that went for big money, but they also didn't sell. Like we're not doing a feature on this one, but there was a 69 sunroof Charger. Sunroof cars have gotten big money lately, and got up to like 145, but didn't sell. So that may be a case where it's kind of a greedy seller as well. But you never know. I mean, there's all sorts of shenanigans always going on at these. Dana Mecum on some of these cars, and some get a little extra screen time on the block because they, Dana owns them, or or they have a prominent collector. Like they'll, if you bring a bunch of cars through there, they'll put in a little more effort to sell your cars than if you just bring one car. I've definitely experienced that at Barrett Jackson before. My dad brought a 70 Charger down there a couple years ago to sell, and it got a little short gabbled. The guys bought it, were even a little surprised what they got it for. So yeah. So we're gonna start out with that Duster, and then we'll go from there. So first car we're going to start out with here was a Duster that sold for insane money, and this was a funny meme we found online about it. People were marking themselves safe from freaking out over a Duster. So this Duster is pretty special. I mean, it is probably the nicest one in the country. Like, you see a lot of survivors of 1970 Dusters and 72s. You never see 71s. It was the first year for the shark tooth grill. They had this has the super cool hood blackout, which is super, super rare on these. Like, everybody always puts these on their car. The factory ones, it was a V24, extremely rare. This one was restored by American Muscle Car Restorations in Rhode Island. They're considered probably the top restoration house in the country right now for Mopars. Present company excluded, but included. But yeah, I mean, obviously $160,000 for a Duster is insane. But saying that, this is the nicest one in the country, like bar none. It is the best year. It's the best optioned. It's the best restored. It's numbers matching. It's a broadcast sheet. I mean, this thing has everything going for it that you would want in a car. I'll say it's going to Delaware, actually. It's kind of funny. They always put stickers on the windows after they sell to show you where they're going from. It's kind of curious. Sometimes you can kind of figure out who bought it from that. But this is video footage from my brother down at McCacken, so you can kind of see it without the bright lights on the stage, which always make them look better than they really are. But this one is the exception. This is a super, super nice car. Again, this guy may be falling $160,000 for a Duster, but if any car deserved that, it's this car. Like, it is just an amazingly restored car, in amazing condition. Got McCacken gold. I mean, every award. Like, this is the best Duster out there. So another common theme from the auction was how strong A-body prices were, and there's several different examples, but I just kind of wanted to show this one because it's kind of a fairly run-of-the-mill 71 Duster. This one's pretty cool. It has the twister package. That was a really cool package they came up with in 71. The insurance rates were going up, and it was basically a 340 Duster, but without a 340. You get a 318 in it, or and then you got rally wheels, and you got the twister stripe, and you got a lot of neat options with it. This one's a 318 with the 3-speed. Again, pretty nice looking car. It doesn't have the hood blackout. There's a few little details that are interesting. It got bid up to 37. No sale. I mean, that's really strong money for a non-340 Duster. But again, another example of, the how strong A-body prices were. Another interesting note on this is the Twister got rally wheels, but the trim rings were actually optional on that. They had a lot of, they tried to get those as cheap as possible, so they made a lot of the options on that, extra cost basically. So, oh, it did sell, my bad. 38,000 plus the juice, so another 10% on top of that. So it's like 42,000, but oof, that is really, really strong money for a non-340 Duster. And that's kind of a common theme from the auction, that A-bodies kind of went nuts at this auction, at the 2024 Mecum Kissimmee auction. So here we have an example of a 69 Dodge Charger. It is a Hemi car, automatic. A lot of little issues with this car. First of all, let's say there's no cowl blackout. That's one of my biggest pet peeves on a Mopar. Like, you're not supposed to be able to see body color through the grill. It also sits up like a 4x4. Sits up super duper high. The interior looks okay. As I said, my brother looked at this car down there and said it really wasn't that nice. It's getting pretty good money though. $150,000 is pretty good money. I mean, Chargers are one of the hotter cars on the market right now. This has dog dishes, and in '68, the only two options for a Hemi car were dog dishes or the full turbine hubcaps. So there weren't too many options that year because you had to have 15s. The Bumblebee stripe doesn't really line up right. It's supposed to be centered on the marker and it's way off. I said, this thing sits up way too high. So it's not a super nice car. And, the fact that it's an automatic, I know for a fact a 4-speed 68 Charger just sold recently, kind of by us. I think it got $125,000. And it needed to be completely put together, with paint. So, this one's 150 right now, or 160 right now. I think it ends up at 165, and then, plus the juice, another 10% on top of that. So that's pretty good money for a kind of a mediocre 1968 Hemi Charger. So, but yeah, here's another example of a car at Mecum, and, kind of a middling quality 1968 Charger. Chargers are one of the hottest cars in the market still. Obviously, a Hemi car is a Hemi car. But yeah, this one ends up at 165 plus the juice. So here's another nice car. It's a 71 Challenger in Citron Yellow, factory AC car and loaded out. And what's neat about this one is it has a sunroof. Sunroof cars are super hot right now, getting really good money. The funny part about this one is this used to be owned by Tim Wellborn. He owns a big collection we've talked about before in Alabama, and he tends to get a premium on his cars. So this car sold for like $130,000 a couple years ago. So at 85 right here, this is at a pretty steep discount, and it's no reserve. It looks like a really nice car. I don't see anything like obviously wrong with it. But yeah, 85 is a pretty good discount, and it looks like that's Troy from Mopar's 5150. So it looks like he's the one who bought it. So he must have thought that one was a pretty good deal because, there is such thing as a Wellborn premium. So good buy on that one. So here's a good example of a car that probably sold for a little bit less than you'd think. This is kind of a neat car. It's got a Dana 60 rear end. It's a factory Hemi Cuda, but it's green on green. Obviously, that's green on green is not the best combination for a Hemi Cuda. It's F8 green with F8 interior. But I talked to a few people who were down at the auction. They said like this car just wasn't that nice. It was like kind of a number 3 driver, so condition really held it back. Apparently it was the same owner from 73 to now 2023, which is pretty impressive. Like I tend to put a premium on a car like that because then you know most of the history on it, you know most of the owner. This one was sold at no reserve, which is obviously a big risk at an auction like this. And it sold for, I know 135,000 doesn't really seem cheap, but for a 70 Hemi Cuda with a Dana, like that's not top dollar for it. So, and that's why, it's like it's green on green. It wasn't a super nice car. There were a lot of factors going into the price on this one. So, but yeah, 70 Hemi Cuda, 135,000. Looks like one happy new owner. We'll see what he thinks when he sobers up. All right, so now we're gonna get into the Wellborn collection cars. We're gonna do 3 of these: the AR Cuda, a 70 Charger, and the Daytona. As mentioned before, you know, Tim is a real high-end Mopar collector. He's been doing this forever. You know, and cars that are in his collection, people know that they're good cars. He doesn't really buy bad cars. So they're really, you know, they always get a premium. I saw this car personally at McCacken, along with the other 2 cars. Got to see it really up close. This AR Cuda is one of the nicest ones in the country. It has 8,500 original miles. It's actually up from our neck of the woods. Came off of Vancouver Island, apparently, years ago. But it's original tires, original interior, original paint. I mean, this is, you know, if not probably one of the nicest Survivor AARs. This might be a record for an AR too. I'd have to look that up, but I mean, $240,000 is huge money. But you know, as we said at the start, Survivors did really well at the auction. This is absolutely Survivor. It's probably the best, you know, AAR out there, and Tim got $240,000 for it, which is that's a lot of money for an AR Cuda. But you know, they're only original once. And this car is one of the ones that probably deserves a price like this. But it's an amazing reference. I took a bunch of pictures of this in Chicago when I was at McCacken. And next we're going to do the 70 Charger. That's Tim right there talking to Frank Mecum. Mecum's kind of in charge. Tim did have reserves on all these cars. So Frank's doing what's called the grinder roll there. That's literally what they call it, the grinder. So they sit by the sellers and try to get him to take the reserve off, basically. So obviously don't know what the reserve was on these. They all sold though. You know, another really nice Survivor 70 Charger RT. This one's an automatic, good color. You know, you can see in the engine bay, there's, you know, some paint missing off the valve covers, but again, just a gorgeous Survivor car. This one is just, I mean, it's one of the nicest Chargers in the country. You know, it's pretty crazy that it's, you know, not a Hemi car, and we're into, you know, $210,000. I mean, Chargers are absolutely insane right now. But it's got, you know, it's got a lot of good options. Has the hood stripes. That's a pretty rare option on these. You know, it's good color. You know, low miles. Like, this thing just has a lot going for it. At the same time, $225,000 is insane money for this. Like, just that's a lot of money for a 70 Charger. That's not a Hemi car. But, you know, they're only original once. Survivors bring a premium. This has the Wellborn premium on it. It just, there's a lot going on here to add up to that price. But wow, yeah, $230,000 for a 70 Charger for a non-Hemi car. I never thought I'd see that, but you know, here we are. All right, there's Tim again. So we're gonna show you the last car we're gonna show you from the Wellborn collection. There was more cars in this. These are just the 3 that I thought were most interesting. This is a 1969 Dodge Daytona, 444 speed red. We actually have one of these in the shop that's very similar option to this, except ours is an automatic, not a 4-speed. Daytonas, you know, they've been really hot. Wing cars have been, you know, getting like really, really dumb money lately. And one thing I noticed at this auction is wing cars kind of cooled off a little bit. You know, there were a few automatics that got 325 last year at Kissimmee. And this one doesn't end up quite that high. Wellborn's actually owned this one for a while, like 20 years. Roger Gibson did the restoration on it. He's one of the top guys in the nation. He's known for his top flight restorations. So like no problems there. Again, it's a Wellborn car. You would have thought with the premium, I would have thought, you know, closer to $400,000 for this. He took the reserve off at $350 here, and it did sell for that. This is another one I saw in person at McCacken in Chicago, Muscle Car Corvette Nationals. Mecum had a few of the Wellborn cars there that they were having at the auction here at Kissimmee this weekend, 2024. Yep, so that's Frank Mecum on the bottom left there. He's the son of Dana, one of the owners of Mecum. The thumbs up means he just took the reserve off. So looks like Tim was looking for $350 for it. Again, I'm not trying to downplay $350,000 isn't a lot of money for a car. It obviously is, but with the provenance of this, with the well-worn connection, with the 4-speed, I honestly would have thought I'd gotten more money than that. We've got the automatic in the shop here right now that we're working on, and the customer's real curious what he thinks that's going to be worth. So yeah, those are the 3 well-worn cars. And wing cars are down a little bit this year, but it's a nice car. So see what happens. So here's the Daytona we're talking about, and this is an example of a wing car going for less than they have been in the past. This is part of this Kevin Sargent collection, which I think had 14 wing cars. But the thing is, this was the only Daytona. People always ask, like, hey, are Daytonas or Superbirds worth more money? Well, Daytonas are, because they made 1,900 or so Superbirds, and they only made 500 or so Daytonas. And, they made 4 times as many Superbirds. Daytonas are a lot rarer. So why did this car not bring the money? Well, there's a bunch of different examples. First of all, I was not really impressed with the quality of the Kevin Sargent collection. He just kind of bought cars to bought cars. He did not buy quality cars. To start out with, this is a 440 automatic, which is kind of the base on Daytona. It's a column shift. But the big hit on this car is it has a bunch of fake documentation. Somebody made a fake fender tag for it. Somebody made a fake broadcast sheet for it. Making fake broadcast sheets is a big deal. Like, the one that's made for this, if you didn't know what you're looking at, it looks real. But there's, known history on this car, and that paperwork was not out there. So they basically fake documentation on this car. And that's just a huge hit. Collectors see that kind of stuff, and it makes the car worth less in the end. It's kind of interesting to see how long they've run these cars. This one was up for about a minute and a half, unless they didn't show some of it. But they tried to work it pretty hard, and they got 222.5, which I think ends up being about 244,000 at the end. They actually had Tim Wilburn was helping commentate on this car. Just kind of interesting. He's very knowledgeable on this stuff. He's the one in the middle. But yeah, so a wing car, just an example of where the market kind of went down a little bit. These were getting 300 to 325 at the last year at Kissimmee. And this car didn't do as well, but, it had a bunch of documentation issues, and that's one of the main reasons. All right, well, there's all of the individual cars we want to go to. We just wanted to highlight a few cars. We basically just kind of took, footage from the Mecum auctions and kind of give you a little more background. We have a lot of, insider knowledge about this stuff. We had several friends down there. My brother was down there. Our friend Scott was down there. Our friend Jim was down there, and we asked them about individual cars. Like if there's an outlier on something that's sold higher or lower, like it's nice having that. Also, I keep a registry of cars with notes. It's like on the yellow Citroen Yellow 71 Challenger. I had notes on that was a well-born car that sold a couple years ago, and it got a $50,000 discount this year. We like keeping track of that stuff because it really tells us where the market's going and what it's worth. So, but yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this. If you want to see this again, we're not going to Barrett this year, unfortunately. We've been last couple years, but we just got too much going on in the shop this year. I don't have time to go down there. But my brother will be down there. So if there's anything, if you want us to do another one, if you enjoyed this, please let us know in the comments. I kind of enjoy doing this. It's kind of fun. This is kind of what I do, every day. We go through and see what the market is. And we enjoy watching the auctions. We DVR them all and go back and watch them. And it's kind of fun sharing some of the settlements. And I'd like to hear what you guys think. It's like, I'm sure you all think that A-bodies are getting way too expensive. But, I just bought, 2 early A-bodies in the last month for under $1,000. It's like, just because a Duster gets $160,000 doesn't mean there's not cheap ones out there. And as I explained in the video, there were good reasons why that car got good money. I mean, yeah, it's an insane amount of money for anybody. Don't get me wrong, but it's also the best one in the country, and it's the best year. It's the best option. Like there's a lot of things with that car that were special that made it get that kind of money. So, yeah, if there's anything else you want to see, if there's anything at Barrett that's coming up that you want to see in particular, my brother's going to be down there. I can have him give me a report of stuff. As I said, if everybody likes this and this video does well, we'll do one for Barrett. That's coming up next week, and We'll see what the market does down there. But you know, it's like everyone wants to think the sky's falling. I really don't think it is. I think the market's just kind of chugging along. You know, personally here at Rocket Restorations, we've never been busier. I mean, we have a multiple year wait to get cars in right now for full restoration. You know, I got a list of people like 30 or 40 people long to come in just to do smaller jobs, and we're trying to squeeze them all in. It's just like, I don't know. It's like everybody always says that the sky's falling, but you know, obviously inflation was up, interest rates were up, but it seems like we've kind of gotten through that without a major recession. The market seems to be turning along. You know, the over the last year, the trend that we've definitely seen is the good cars are still bringing good money, and the bad cars aren't. And that's, you know, kind of, if a market's working correctly, that's kind of how it should be. You know, in 2020, 21, there during the pandemic, you know, there was some real junk selling for big money. You know, like you see a rusted out Charger sell for $10,000, $15,000, and we're not seeing that now. You know, the prices are definitely falling back on those a little bit. You know, the nice good cars are still bringing good money, but the crap really isn't. You know, if it's had bad body work, or, you know, numbers matching, broadcast sheet, non-fender tag, you know, there's a huge hit on that. You know, the great example is that Daytona, in that big collection. You know, it didn't bring as much money as the other Daytonas have been bringing. And I don't know if that's because wing car's a little softer, or it just wasn't a good car. You know, there was a fake fender tag for that car and a fake broadcast sheet for that car. And, you know, that really pisses people off. You know, it's like, it's almost better if it didn't have that stuff. You know, there's previous known history of that car, you know, that it did not have a broadcast sheet. And then one shows up and it's a pretty obvious reproduction. And the fender tag is too. You know, they put a lot of effort in to fake those. But it just kind of, I mean, it spoils the car. I mean, for me, I would not buy a car with fake paperwork. It ruins it for me. You know, it's like, I'd rather buy a car without any of that stuff than if somebody tries to fake it, because, you know, I know there's experts out there who can tell you what's fake and what isn't, but, you know, it taints the car. You know, it's like the fact that people are making that stuff kind of just, it makes me angry, because it's just, it gives a bad name to the hobby, and it makes it harder to get in here. You know, I've got, you know, a lot of our customers have been burned from other shops, and it really ticks me off when somebody takes something to another shop and they rip them off, and then, you know, they end up having to come here and basically spend just as much money as they would have had to if we had to start from scratch. So again, everybody has their own opinion on paperwork and everything. Most people don't care, and that's fine. Everybody has their own opinion on this stuff, but so you can't argue that the top end cars, you know, get more money with that documentation. I think it's important to have that. So, so yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. As I said, if this video does well, we'll try to do one on Barrett next week. Well, it's probably 2 weeks. I think Barrett's next weekend, but we'll probably do one in like 2 weeks. So hope everybody enjoyed it. As I said, if you want me to go more in depth on stuff, you know, it's like we have a lot of knowledge about this stuff. You know, I can, you know, the bright lights had a lot on TV, but, you know, we can spot a lot of that stuff even through that. And as I said, you know, we had firsthand reports on some of these cars to figure out why they were selling for more or less. So thanks everybody for watching. Please leave a comment, like the video, and if you love our channel, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.